Hey guys, I just wanted to take a minute to address an article I saw in the Washington Post this morning, talking about how police homicide among 25 to 29-year-old men in the United States is like the sixth leading cause of death for them. Frank Edwards at Rutgers University, I guess, did a study using Fatal Encounters database, which is the same database that I use at my work. I work on helping to create that database, so I'm familiar with it, and I just want to talk about it a little bit. Because I know this is an issue right now. So they say that in the piece they talk about how for every 100,000 people in that age group, men in that age group, 25 to 29, about 76.6 die of accidental deaths. So overdoses, car wrecks, then 26.7 suicide, 22's homicide, 7 was heart disease, cancer was like 6, and then police homicide was 1.8. So 1.8 out of every 100,000 men aged 25 to 29, that's your chances of dying if you're in that age group from a police homicide, 1.8 per 100,000, which is pretty damn high. And for black men, that's 2.5 times higher. So about 1 in every 1,000 for black men in that age group, which is crazy. So that database, there's a few things that are left out in these data, and I just want to talk about it. So like the Fatal Encounters database, it includes suicides, car accidents. So if someone's fleeing from the police, if someone commits suicide during a police encounter. And while those incidents they're not included, there are a lot of instances where the behavior of a law enforcement agency just based on reviewing these types of incidents, can play a major role in determining an outcome. So like here's a great example. You see this when you analyze these data. You see this all the time. Police officers driving in their patrol car, they see someone slow roll through a red light. They try to stop them. 18-year-old kid is driving and takes off, and the police officer chases them, and the kid crashes and dies. While the police officer didn't commit a homicide, knowing what we know about policing, like as a profession, and professional police officers recognize that's just not best practices. So should that type of an activity be included in that count? I don't know, but it just not by not including these types of deaths, I think that it's an operational definition. Well, what's a police homicide? What I'm trying to say is that encounters with the police and interactions with the police may lead to a lot more deaths among people in this cohort than we think, because in this particular study they're just talking about like the way they're defining police homicide is much more narrow than as a society we may want to define it. And then they talk in the piece, they talk about like their own database. So like the federal government does a really crappy job. They don't do a good job. They're trying to start now of maintaining a database where they record all of these deaths and document them so that scientists can measure them and conduct experiments, and not experiments, but studies, and try to understand the phenomena better. But the government fell flat on its face and did not do a good job of doing this, largely because there are just so many agencies in the United States. It was no one's responsibility. So like the Washington Post, the Guardian, some other websites have started collecting these data on their own. The problem with these is they use different operational definitions, and they don't include things that you might think they would. So like the Guardian would include taser deaths and things like that, someone who died during a fight. But the Washington Post is just people who shot by the police. So what happened in Minneapolis, the death yesterday, the day before, the controversy, that death wouldn't have been included in their count. So there's these operational definitions, how we define something, different people defining it in different ways. There's not a lot of clarity in what is the problem that we're trying to address and how wide scale it is. And until we know those things, it's going to be very difficult to address. And the other thing, and this has been talked about in the academic literature quite a bit, is the Washington Post is counting people who are shot and killed by the police. Okay, but if we want to know, well, how are the police engaging with the public? Just killing people is not necessarily the only problem. So what about people who get shot and survive, end up in wheelchairs, or wounded? Police officers, just like most people who operate firearms, are crappy shots. Police don't receive enough training, as far as I'm concerned, and like people miss, and also under stress they miss. But that doesn't mean that nothing happened. I mean, a police officer made a conscious decision to shoot a citizen, whether they say they hit them and they survive, or they miss the citizen altogether. That decision was still made. It was still the state making a decision to shoot someone, a civilian. And just because a person doesn't die, does that mean it shouldn't be counted? So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about when we see these numbers in the press saying, it's this big a problem, it's that big a problem. Just keep in mind that every person who writes an article like this is going to be using a different data source, and their definitions are going to be different. This I thought was a pretty good piece. Like that they used the Fatal Encounters database, and they're pretty clear saying what they did. But when you do read these, it can be confusing. So if anyone has any questions or wants me to address any issues related to what's happening or this social problem in general, please just shoot me. Hit me up on Twitter or hit me in the questions below. And if you want to get alerts on these videos, subscribe and ring that bell so you get those. All right. Thank you.